All right, the shortened version. I like that.
It's our low-tech, non-sen introduction. Thanks to Nate and Josh for dropping into the show, and now you're stuck with us, your hosts, Tiffany, Brian, and myself, and we're going to chat a little bit about the show, what we heard, what we think, and share our opinions as well. The new format this season is we're trying to spend the main show focused on our guests, and then the after show is kind of the chance for the hosts to share their experiences and thoughts on the episode. So if you're unfamiliar or connecting over now to the show, we just talked about pitching, and we also talked about development, and we're going to chat a little bit about that. So I'm curious. I'm just going to throw the spotlight on Brian because we don't normally get you on the show. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on pitching and development? What are some initial thoughts?
That's a good question. So with pitching, I've never been in the formal with pitching to publishers. This is blasphemy, but I've never done a sell sheet. So
that's not blasphemy because Sen's not here, so you can get away with that.
All right, because when I've talked to some designers, they'll say, "What do you think of my sell sheet?" And I'll say, "Well, I don't know if I can give you feedback because I've never done one." Because a lot of it has come through the social interaction with the publishers, getting to know them, talking to them, meeting them year after year, and then coming up, hey, I have this game. Would you be willing to take a look at it? And they know me, so it's not someone who's just coming up out of the blue.
Totally.
And so they're more willing to give me an ear and to maybe give it a play test. But that being said, designers, do your sell sheets.
Yeah. Like, don't do as I say.
Right.
Well, because not everybody has the same relationships.
Absolutely. And it does take time to build relationships. A sell sheet's helpful. I mean, at the end of the day, I think what a sell sheet is you need to get kind of your elevator pitch down packed. And you can put it on paper, or you can practice it verbally, or you can have some relationships that'll help you get away with being able to kind of skip the sell sheet stage. But no matter what, you need to know your game. I think Nate said it really well. You need to be able to say like kind of the brass tacks, the main points of your game very quickly, so that at least right away a publisher can gauge, is this even starting with a good fit, and then let's get into the nitty gritty.
Right, because there are definitely publishers out there that have a niche that they want to, it's just the way it is, If you're going to pitch a heavy minis game to an indie publisher or, a smaller publisher, they're probably not going to want your game.
No, that's going to be intimidating.
Right. They're going to go, we don't have the money for that,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Out of curiosity, what are some publishers that you have had the opportunity to informally pitch a game to? What are some examples?
Z-Man, when Zev was running it. And that's just another example of, I was talking to Nate, who unfortunately passed away a few months ago, used to volunteer for Z-Man, and so talking to him, and he was kind of getting into the little publishing. So I said, hey, would you mind, testing this game? And I'm not really pitching. I just want to get some feedback. And he said, yeah. So he played it, and he's like, oh my gosh, Zev has to play this, so I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that at all. So Zev came over and he loved it. He's like, unfortunately, this isn't a style of game that we would publish, but let me give you some ideas on where to go from here. So that led to actually, I think a couple of years later, me pitching another game to him. I contacted him before Origins and said, hey, I have this game. Would you be willing to play test it? And he's like, yeah, definitely. Set up an appointment. We'll play test it. He had some good feedback. He said, I don't think this is a good fit for our company, but you've got some good things going on here. And that game later on actually it was signed by Pandasaurus. So, and I think that fits with them. So I didn't understand until my mid 30s and and early 40s about, networking. And I didn't get what networking was in my 20s. I didn't know that. I was a musician, right? So I was like, networking, I don't know what that means. And just the ability to meet people, and you never know, the person you're talking to might be friends with someone somewhere else, and say, hey, you got to check out this game.
Totally. Well, and the game industry is very friendly that way.
It's extremely tight knit.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you seen, Tiffany, while going around and doing reviews and talking to people, how many times have you seen pitches go down? Or like,
all the time.
What are some examples of times that you've seen pitches go down? Like how?
So it happens a lot, and if you've attended Origins, you've probably seen pitches, because I know some publishers actually have a table at Origins in their booth that they set aside for pitching. And so if you ever swing by and there's a group of all adults dressed rather nicely, sitting poring over a piece of paper that does not look pretty in any way, shape, or form, that's a pitch. So what comes to mind most clearly is Calliope Games. I know does a lot of pitching with Ray, and Chris Leader is often there. I'm listening to pitches as their main developer, and so it's interesting, because in this industry, in this hobby, when you approach somebody, even if they're a designer or they're a publisher, or maybe they're the main person of contact that you've had with this business, either as me as a reviewer talking to them as a member of the press, or if you're just another designer and you want to reach out to this person, you never know what kind of conversation you're approaching. And I would probably say 50% of the time when I approach a group of people that are standing there talking, they're doing a pitch at that moment, right? And they're either pitching for themselves or they're pitching for somebody else. So it's one of those things to be, if you're in a convention setting, be super mindful and respectful, because you might be interrupting the pitch of the next Alex Pfister. You know what I mean? And you could piss off the publisher, you could piss off the designer. And you're setting up an impression about yourself that will last, and it will propagate, because a lot of these publishers and designers talk to each other because they're all friends. So.
The word spreads. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think sometimes what happens at conventions is, designers are really want to pitch their games, and they're kind of oblivious to what's going on because they're so focused on what they want to do. If you walk up to a booth and that publisher is the only person in the booth, don't pitch your game to them. Don't say, do you have a second to listen to my pitch? Set up an appointment, be professional, because they've got to man the booth. They want to sell their games while they're there. That's why they're there.
They're there for. Yeah.
I mean, they have to, because often at these shows, if those sales are just covering the cost of being there.
Exactly. And so, don't be offended if a publisher says to you, I don't have time right now. Can you come back? Email. Yeah. Or send me your prototype. Here's my information. Don't be offended. You may think you have the best product on earth, but they're there to make money. That's the bottom line. Get their product out there and make money.
Really, really good advice. I'm curious, just let's talk a couple more minutes about pitching, because I know both of you actually good communicators. What are some practical advice that we would give people when it comes to pitching? What have we seen that are some of the horror stories, and then what are some examples of people that do it well? What are they doing well?
The first thing, I'm just going to reiterate what I said: be professional. You don't have to wear a suit and tie or anything like that. I don't mean don't look presentable. Don't look like you rolled out of bed, and don't be hungover. But be professional. Respect their time and respect what they do, because if you piss that person off, you don't know who else they're going to tell that, hey, stay away from that person, because they're just a pain to work with.
Right.
Yeah. And on that, I mean, you guys have seen I don't know if you guys have seen, people have seen my vlogs, and what I wear in the vlogs is what I wear when I go into business kind of things, when I'm doing interviews or I'm talking for review copies, and that's totally acceptable, because my attitude is also, it's a con. People wear nerdy t-shirts, it's fine, but there's a difference between being hungover and being showered, so there's that. But another thing that I would definitely say is that a lot of people when you're pitching, and I had this experience on my very first Origins where I was hanging out with a couple of designers who had never pitched before, and they were going to speed dating, and they were extremely nervous. And it was really fun for me because they were hanging out with me, and I know these other designers that are like bigger names, and I know these publishers, and like we just chat and shoot the shit. Sorry. And these designers who are like freaking out about pitching their games are like, oh my God, that's this person. How can you be so cool? And it's like, well, everybody's human. That's the first.
Yeah.
And at these conventions, when you're in certain circles, it's this weird line that you have to cross between being professional and also at the same time being familiar and friendly, because for a lot of it's like a traveling circus. It really is. During the convention season, everybody sees each other every couple of weeks at like different cons.
Yep.
And it really does feel like you're part of a traveling circus or like a summer camp. And so if you want to jump into that, you can, but you still have to be super professional in that regard. So it's this weird, like professional but friendly. So yeah, I got off on a tangent on something
That's
I didn't
okay.
even talk about.
That's good. That's good.
But I wanted to also say, when you're pitching your game, there's a thing about being confident, and you don't have to be confident in just like yourself and presenting, but you have to be confident in your game. Like, there's a difference when I'm nervous, and I'm nervous because I'm talking to you, and like a lot is riding on this because this is my baby, but I can still be nervous, and I can give off the social cues that I'm nervous, but I can still be confident in what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Right.
And one of the big ways to help with that is to practice your pitch. That's like a huge thing. Like, just practice to everybody until it gets to the point where like it's almost muscle memory. So even if you're crazy nervous, you still got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go for it.
No,
man.
that's just because we're talking about pitching and being confident. There's a difference between being confident and being cocky and being obnoxious, to the point where I've seen people and sell sheets where it's, well, this is like way better than Dominion. Right. It's like, no, I don't think it is. But, I haven't played it, but, you don't come in saying that, because it just turns a publisher off, I think, personally, when you come in and say, well, this is the best of this, and this is going to be great for you because of this. Yes. Don't tell the publisher how it's going to be great for them. Let them figure out how it fits into their catalog and how it's going to grow their business.
Yeah, absolutely. I love pitching. I love developing. So this topic is like totally up my alley. I really enjoy it.
You're the pitch master.
Well, I enjoy pitching, and one of the things that, you're talking about confidence, I think really important, and practicing your pitch. You don't have to have every word figured out, but it's really important to figure out a little bit of your routine. Like how you're going to process if someone says no. What's your reaction going to be to that? How can you listen well and then discern which kind of games they really want to see? Practice thinking through, what are your small games? What are your big games? What's your quick, things like that. Think through your games that you have, if you have more than one. The other thing is practice a few key lines. Just figure out a few, like we were talking about, from the beginning. Brian asked the question to Nate of, what is it fair to, say it's this game and this game, like comparisons. Think through that and say, it's this game with a twist to this, or, those kind of things we heard from our guests are really helpful, because then they can process and know not only that you're well informed about games, but you recognize and kind of have like a self-awareness of what your game is. So practice a few lines, and try to even mix in some humor. It's supposed to be fun. You're playing games here. So at the end of the day, sometimes when I see other people's pitches, it looks like work. And, the idea is people want to have fun. They want the games to create fun for others. And I'm not saying that every game has to be like goofy, but I'm still saying, you love this game, so point out why other people have a good time with it. So
and it's one of those things, like Brian, you were mentioning, like, don't say this game is better than Dominion. Like, this is the best version of Dominion you've ever played. Like, you can still say this game is in the same veins of Dominion, but we've tweaked it and we feel it's like a little better in this regard. Like, you can do that,
Right.
And even let them discover why it's better. Say it's similar to this, but we think it, does some innovative stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, and you can also just be like, this is the best. This is, my grandmother says this is the best version of Dominion she's ever played. Like, you can do that if you want to bring humor into it. But, you don't...
I'm afraid someone might quote that for serious.
Oh, well, that's fine. It's like oh my God, that Drunk Quest review. I still am never living that down. Steve says my best line ever is when I say it's the best version of Munchkin I've never played. Anyway. I was really... Anyway. So it's one of those things, and if you've ever had a conversation with your friends, which I'm assuming you have, when they're like, "Hey, that new game that you picked up, like Dead of whatever, what's that like?" And you go, "Oh, well, it's like this, but like this."
Right.
You just pitched them Dead of Winter. Like, you need to come up with that same kind of like thought process and tone when it comes to pitching your own games. Like with Honshu. I did this earlier. My pitch for Honshu, I've got it down. It's a trick-taking tile placement city building game set in feudal Japan. Like, that's my pitch for Honshu.
Yep.
And I can build on that. But like, it's very similar when you're pitching games to friends to just play. It's the same. You're just doing it to a publisher, and you're also trying to sell them the game. But it's the same foot when you start off.
Yeah, I think we're talking about pitching. But let's talk about the other side of that, and that is rejection, right? Yep. Because I have seen so many game designers just like not being able to take any type of criticism or rejection of their baby, and I think that's an important thing.
Defense mechanisms.
Yeah, it is just like, well, no. I remember sitting in a playtest once, and I was with Uwe from Academy Games, and I was playing, and we were playing this zombie game. And something came up it was just broken, and we said we're trying to get this designer feedback, and he's like, "Well, this has never happened before." Well, but it just did. He's like, "Well, I don't think it'll ever happen again." Well, it could, and it's going to create a bad experience. So it's just the fact that if you are not open to critiques, if a publisher says to you, "No, that's not my style of game," don't be defensive. Turn it around to your advantage and say, "Well, what kind of game are you looking for?"
Yeah.
What does interest you?
It blew my mind, though. One time I watched Kevin Wilson do a pitch. He's pretty low-key, under the radar, usually in a private room somewhere. But I saw him doing a pitch in a room, and I kind of like came over. I was pretty new to design, and I kind of just eavesdropped in. And it was amazing. There was this one moment where I was like, that's what I got to learn to do. And it was a publisher was saying, "Oh yeah, I really like this and this, but this part here, I really don't like. I wish that wasn't here." And he goes, "It's not." And he pulls the thing literally out and says, "What else could we do there?" And they're like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Well, I have an idea. What about if it was like this?" And they were like, "Oh, I like that." He's like, "Well, let's continue. Just imagine that's what I showed you."
And then he just pulls it back in because he just convinced.
I was amazed, and on the fly, that he was A, like gracious to their idea, B, he had an idea of how to do it in a different way, and that he just didn't even miss a beat. Like, he was just like positive, creative, and just kept the flow going. And Nate said it in the previous episode. Imagine you're role playing. Like, just try a yes out. Just keep going with it. Be creative. So. I agree, Brian. That's rejection is a tough one to learn how to adapt to.
Yeah, it's like you're going on a blind date, and sometimes it's not even a blind date. Like, you've talked with them and you've chatted with them, and you're like, "Let's go out for drinks."
Yeah.
And then you're talking with them, and then it turns out like stuff ain't just gonna work, and then you're just like, "Well, let's change this for you." Like. Yeah.
It's funny you talk about the blind date. My point is, don't turn into the crazy ex-girlfriend.
Right. Yeah.
Well, just crazy ex. Let's not gender it. Right. I've had some crazy dudes.
No, I say crazy ex-girlfriend because of that show. That's odd.
Yeah.
But crazy ex, exactly. Don't turn into crazy ex where they have maybe rejected you, and you are just constantly always sending them emails and Twitters, and just move on.
Yeah.
Let's
find some other publisher. Like,
exactly.
Every publisher is different, just like every gamer is different. Every publisher is looking for different stuff. If everybody was looking for the same kind of games, we would have 57 Feast of Odins, which I would be fine with. But like, it's just different publishers have different stuff. And the other thing is if you really, if you're in the meeting and the publisher is just like, it's not working and they're not interested, ask them if they know of a publisher that might be interested in the game, because all the publishers talk, and their publishers are not really like, no, this is mine, you may never, like, they'll talk and they're willing to help you if they see something. They'd be like, oh, well, maybe chat with so and so, and they'll just give you an idea of the publisher name. And even if they won't, like, ask your friends, ask other designers. Because, I mean, Daryl, right now, I'm sure I've talked to you about some games, and you'll be like, oh, well, you should try this to this company and this company and this company, but don't talk to this company because they don't want that.
Right.
So, yeah.
And they're not going to steal your idea.
Yeah, no.
I always just lose it when designers are like, well, if I show them this game, they may say that they don't like it, but then they're going to design it.
Yeah,
they're not going to do that. They don't have time for that. They've got hundreds of other games.
So many other games to look at.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
absolutely.
It's so a pet peeve of mine in general when people are like, oh, they took that idea and they just took this other game's idea and they stole it. And it's like, no, that game was probably in development for 3 years. Like, it didn't just happen overnight. Like,
right. Yeah. So talking about that, let's kind of change gears to the development cycle a little bit, because we talked about that too. And I want to reiterate before we go there, just my first week with IDW, I just finished my first week. I've already gone through 20 game reviews of submissions. So the point of, like, there's lots of games that are getting sent around. No publisher is wasting their time trying to steal something, because they're just gonna find a good game so that fits them. So I mean, and then once they do find it, then there's this long development process. So was there anything that stood out to you talking to, I mean, mostly it was with Josh, but a little bit with Nate, about the development process, or from personal experience, is there anything that you kind of want to inform people realistically, what about the development process?
There was one note, and I took it down, and it was from Nate, actually, and it was one of the things that scared him. And he said that his audio blipped out, or his internet blipped out, so I didn't get the time. But he said basically it was development time that's been too short on the side of the designer that's doing the pitch terrifies him. Like, if it's like, this game has been in development for 2 months, like, oh no, And I think that's one thing that a lot of people that are designers, that are new designers, they can kind of get dejected by. They're like, oh my god, I've been working on this game for 4 months. When's it going to end? And you have to realize, like, most games are in development for years.
Yeah. I mean, the game I'm working on with John, that's with Panda now, Pandasaurus, it's been in development for, gosh, I don't know, 18, 20 months.
I was just going to say, the first time I met you, I got to play it.
Mm-hmm. That was before Origins, so
just before Origins 2 years ago.
Yeah. So it's you just have. It is just not going to happen that quick. I mean, there are going to be rare instances where games get pushed to the front and they are out there quicker. But if you are a designer, count on 2 years from when your game is signed.
Yeah. Like, Feast of Odin was like, it's sitting next to me and I really want to play it. Yeah. It's like 3 years, and he got 3 games out of that mechanic because the development on that one was so long.
Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing to mention is, like, as a designer, the more that you develop your game and make sure it's polished, you're going to get a bunch of spin-off benefits. One is a really great reputation. You're going to be presenting games that people go, wow, those are good, complete games. The other thing is, like Tiffany just mentioned, you might have other games that spin out of it. I mean, even Tiffany and I are working on a design where we started with a big game, and then we were like, wait, this mechanic could work with a small game first. So we're actually now kind of backtracking and working on the small game, polishing that up. And then, we're going to go back to the mechanic and work on the bigger game that we have in mind. But again, when you take the time to work on a game, you're going to see it from different angles. You're going to be inspired for different games. So not only are you gaining a good reputation by doing the work, you're also going to be inspired to create other games from it. And it might not be sharing a mechanic. It might even just be in the process. You learn things that are going to help you make other good games.
Yeah, and it's the other one I wanted to kind of bring up is the concept of working on multiple games at once, because it came up. Brian, you mentioned it earlier, where when you're pitching and you're just like, this game's not work, and you're like, well, what do you want to try? And I have these other games. Don't force yourself to just work on one game, because you're gonna burn out on it. It's like with any creative process. If you're a painter, if you're a video editor, if you're a writer, like, you can't just force yourself to work on one creative thing. Like, you need to branch out. And you'll find that as you're branching out and working on development of other things, you'll get ideas and be more inspired to go back to what you want to work on.
Yeah, and also that being said, don't be afraid to toss stuff out.
Yeah.
Edit. I mean, I've had games I've put in a box and I come back to a year later and I'm like, what was I thinking?
Right.
This is just awful. But at the time, and I think sometimes as designers, it's really hard to let go of something we've invested so much time in. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And no amount of, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig, It's just that, you can throw a bunch of mechanics in that you like, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you can't be afraid to let go, or to actually, condense, the game that John and I designed. We posted pictures on Twitter one day. We cut like over 180 components from the game. Yeah, we were doing it. Because we streamlined. We took a step back, saying, how can we make this more efficient and more streamlined? Because we knew that a publisher would be more willing to look at this and go, okay, as opposed to this has 180 more components or whatever it was at the time, and they're going to look at that and go, we can't afford that, So that's something you have to consider as well.
What a perfect plug for next week's episode, because we will be talking. I mentioned this on the main episode, but I'll mention it here as the after show. Next week we'll be talking to JT Smith of GameCrafter and Ben Rassett of Panda Games, and we're going to be talking about prototyping and specifically talking about production, keeping production in mind while designing. So things like Brian just talking about, streamlining and figuring ways to cut things are important questions to ask, so that a game is practical and affordable. Anything from also asking questions like, and then we'll get into it, but next week, but things like art and thinking through how many pieces of art you might need or things like that. So lots of good stuff. And if you have questions along those lines or ideas along those lines this week, feel free, send us a tweet, and we can use your questions in next week's episode. If you have ideas or questions that you would love to be discussed, we really appreciate that. So we're actually kind of running out of time. Yeah. But I just want to say thanks, Brian, for hanging out with us. Yeah. It's always a treat. And for anyone, Brian will usually actually be kind of the sub-in for Sen this season. So we're looking forward to seeing Brian, hopefully kind of on a monthly basis when Sen can't come in. And we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Tiff, glad that you're home and getting better. And looking forward to future episodes. We gotta I gotta wrap actually. So on that note, bye everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great day.
All right, that's the short version. All right, guys.